Zira pressed herself against the cold metal wall of the maintenance shaft, her tiny three-fingered hands trembling, as heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor below. The sound grew louder with each passing second, making her heart race so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. At barely 3 feet tall, she was small even by Catherian standards, but that had always been her advantage when hiding from the larger species that dominated the galaxy. The space station Nexus 7 was supposed to be neutral territory, a place where all species could trade and interact peacefully. For most beings, that was true. But for the Catherians, it was just another place where they were reminded of their position at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. They were tolerated because they were useful. Their small size made them perfect for maintenance work in tight spaces. Their quick reflexes ideal for delicate repairs, and their naturally nervous disposition meant they rarely caused trouble. Zira had been working in the environmental systems when she heard the announcement that made her blood freeze. Humans had arrived at the station. Real humans, not just stories or distant rumors, but actual members of the species that had become legend throughout the galaxy in just 50 years. Everyone knew the stories, how humans had appeared seemingly from nowhere, their small blue-green world hidden in an unremarkable star system that every other species had ignored, how they had gone from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than a century, how they had fought off 3 different invasion attempts by established galactic powers, not through superior technology, but through sheer determination and tactical brilliance that defied all logic. But the stories that truly terrified smaller species like the Catherians were the ones about human unpredictability. Humans were the only known species that could switch from gentle protector to ruthless warrior in seconds. They were capable of extreme kindness and extreme violence, sometimes within the same conversation. Most frightening of all, they seemed to have no predictable behavioral patterns. A human might pet a dangerous animal one moment and fight a creature twice their size the next. The footsteps stopped directly below her hiding spot. Zira held her breath, pressing herself even flatter against the maintenance shaft's wall. She had been trying to reach the central environmental processor to replace a damaged filter when the announcement came. Now she was trapped, too frightened to move forward and too scared to go back. Through the narrow grating, she could see part of the corridor below. A shadow moved across her limited field of vision, far too large to be another Catherian, too broad to be one of the tall, thin Zelrani, and moving with a confident stride that none of the other worker species possessed. A human. An actual human was standing just a few feet away from her. Zira had seen images, of course. Everyone had. But seeing a human in person was different. Even from her limited view, she could tell they were massive compared to her. The shadow suggested someone nearly 6 feet tall, which meant they could probably reach up and grab her even in her supposedly safe hiding spot. She tried to remember everything she had been told about humans. They were omnivores, which meant they could eat almost anything, including other sapient species if they chose to. They had forward-facing eyes like predators, enhanced by their ability to see a wider spectrum of light than most species. Their hearing was acute enough to detect heartbeats and breathing from considerable distances. Worst of all, they were pack hunters who worked together with an efficiency that had allowed them to defeat enemies with superior numbers and technology. The human below shifted position, and Zira caught a glimpse of brown hair and pale skin. Male, she thought, based on the body structure, though human sexual dimorphism was less pronounced than in many species. He seemed to be examining something on the wall, probably a maintenance panel or system readout. Zira realized with growing horror that he was looking at the environmental system diagnostics. The same system she was supposed to be repairing. If there was a problem with the air filtration, he would eventually trace it back to her location. Humans were known for their problem-solving abilities and persistence. Once they started investigating something, they rarely stopped until they found answers. She tried to think of an escape route, but the maintenance shaft only led in 2 directions, forward toward the central processor, or back the way she had come. Both routes would require her to move, and any movement would create noise. Humans were also known for their excellent hearing. The sound of metal on metal reached her ears. He was opening an access panel. Zira realized he must be investigating the air quality readings that had prompted her repair mission in the first place. Her supervisor had mentioned that several complaints had come in about stale air in this section of the station. Part of her wanted to just stay hidden and wait for him to leave, but she knew that was impossible. If the environmental system wasn't repaired soon, it would affect life support for hundreds of beings in this section. She had a job to do, and despite her fear, she had never failed to complete an assigned task. But how could she possibly work with a human so close by? Everything she had heard suggested that humans were unpredictable and potentially dangerous. They might react badly to finding a Cytherian in the maintenance systems. They might think she was spying or sabotaging something. They might simply see her as prey. Zira closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She needed to think logically, not let fear control her actions. The human was investigating the same problem she had been sent to fix. Maybe if she was very careful and very lucky, she could complete her work without him noticing her presence. She began to move slowly forward through the shaft, each movement calculated to create as little noise as possible. The central processor was still about 20 feet ahead, and she would have to pass directly over the human's position to reach it. As she crept forward, she could hear him working below. The sounds were methodical and careful, suggesting someone who knew what they were doing. That was both good and bad news. Good because it meant he probably wasn't just randomly breaking things. Bad because it meant he was competent enough to potentially detect her presence. Zira reached the point where the maintenance shaft passed directly over the corridor where the human was working. Through the grating, she had a clear view of him for the first time. Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the environmental control panel. 3 days into his assignment on Nexus 7, and he was already dealing with system failures. The air quality readings in Section C had been declining steadily, and now they were approaching levels that could be dangerous. For some of the more sensitive species, aboard the station, he had volunteered for this posting, specifically because it would give him a chance to work alongside different alien species and learn their technologies. As a xenoengineer, he found the variety of life support requirements fascinating. What was breathable air for humans might be toxic to Zelrani, while the high oxygen environment preferred by Cytherian workers could cause problems for methane-breathing species. The diagnostic panel showed a clear pattern. Reduced air circulation efficiency in the upper levels, particularly around the main filtration systems. Marcus traced the problem through the station's schematic display, noting that the issue seemed to be localized around the primary environmental processor for this section. He opened his toolkit and began removing the access panel that would give him direct access to the air circulation monitoring systems. As he worked, he became aware of a faint sound from somewhere above him. Just a whisper of movement, so quiet he almost dismissed it as normal station settling noises. Marcus paused in his work and listened more carefully. There it was again, a soft scratching sound like something small moving through the maintenance shafts. That made sense. The Cytherians who worked on the station were known for their skill in maintaining the smaller systems that larger species couldn't easily access. He had been briefed about the various alien species he would encounter, but the Cytherians had been described only briefly. Small humanoids, excellent technical skills, generally nervous around larger species. The briefing had mentioned that they preferred to work when other species weren't around, which explained why he rarely saw them despite their reputation for keeping the station running smoothly. Marcus returned to his work, but he found himself thinking about the Cytherians. From what he understood, they were considered one of the more vulnerable species in the galactic community. Their small size and non-aggressive nature made them ideal targets for exploitation by less scrupulous species. It was one of the reasons he had been looking forward to potentially working with them. He thought maybe he could show that humans weren't the dangerous monsters that many smaller species apparently believed them to be. The scratching sound came again, closer this time. Marcus looked up at the ventilation grating directly above his position. The sound was definitely coming from there. He could see faint movement in the shadows beyond the grating, confirming his suspicion that a Cytherian maintenance worker was up there. For a moment, Marcus considered calling out a greeting, but he hesitated. His briefing had specifically mentioned that Cytherians were easily startled and that sudden contact with larger species often caused them significant stress. The last thing he wanted to do was frighten someone who was just trying to do their job. Instead, he decided to continue working and see if the Cytherian would initiate contact when they were ready. He had learned from his experiences with shy animals back on Earth that patience and non-threatening behavior were usually more effective than direct approaches. Marcus pulled out a small handheld scanner and began checking the air. Quality readings at different points along the corridor. The readings confirmed his suspicion. There was definitely a filtration problem somewhere in the upper systems, probably in the central processor that the maintenance shafts provided access to. As he worked, he began to notice something interesting. The sounds from above seemed to follow a pattern, moving in the same direction he would expect someone to travel if they were heading toward the central environmental processor. The Cytherian up there wasn't just hiding. They were apparently on the same mission he was. That gave Marcus an idea. Instead of trying to make contact directly, maybe he could help the Cytherian complete their work more efficiently. He pulled up the station's maintenance protocols on his datapad and began studying the environmental system in more detail. The central processor would need to be accessed from the maintenance shaft above, but the power coupling that fed it could be reached from his position in the corridor. If he could isolate the power flow and run a diagnostic cycle, it would make any repair work much safer for someone working directly with the system. Marcus began the power isolation sequence, making sure to work slowly and methodically. Each action he took would show up on monitoring systems throughout that section of the environmental grid, giving the Cytherian above a clear indication of what he was doing and why. He noticed that the sounds from above had stopped completely. The Cytherian was probably monitoring the same systems and trying to figure out what was happening. Marcus hoped his actions would be interpreted as helpful rather than threatening. After completing the power isolation, Marcus activated the diagnostic mode that would test each component of the filtration system individually. This would give the Cytherian detailed information about exactly which parts needed attention, potentially saving hours of troubleshooting time. The sounds from above resumed, more confident this time. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. It seemed like his indirect approach was working. He could hear the Cytherian moving toward the central processor, their movement now purposeful rather than hesitant. Marcus continued his own diagnostics from the corridor level, occasionally making small adjustments that would support whatever repair work was happening above. He found himself falling into a comfortable rhythm, anticipating what the Cytherian might need and providing support without any direct communication. It was unlike any collaboration he had ever experienced. Working with humans usually involved constant communication, discussion of approaches, and mutual problem-solving through conversation. This was more like a dance, each partner responding to the other's movements without words. 20 minutes into this indirect collaboration, Marcus heard a sound from above that made him freeze. It was quiet but unmistakable, a small whimper of fear or pain. Someone was in trouble. Marcus immediately looked up at the grating above his position. "Hello?" he called softly. "Are you okay up there?" The response was complete silence, but Marcus could sense the tension in that silence. Someone was definitely there, and they were probably terrified that he had spoken to them directly. Marcus set down his tools and stepped directly under the grating. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said in the gentlest voice he could manage. "I'm just trying to help with the environmental repairs. Are you injured?" Still no response, but Marcus thought he could hear very quiet, rapid breathing. Fear breathing. He recognized it from his own experiences in dangerous situations. "My name is Marcus," he continued, keeping his voice low and calm. "I'm a human, and I know that probably scares you, but I promise I'm not dangerous. I've been trying to help with your repair work by handling the power systems from down here." Marcus paused, giving the Cytherian time to process his words. He could see a faint shadow moving behind the grating, suggesting that whoever was up there was at least listening to him. "I'm going to step back now," Marcus said, moving away from the grating to give the Cytherian more space. "But if you need help or if you're hurt, please let me know. I won't try to grab you or force you to come down. I just want to make sure you're safe." Zira's entire body shook as the human's voice reached her through the grating. He knew she was there. After all her careful movements, all her attempts at stealth, he had detected her anyway. Just like the stories said, humans were excellent hunters who could track prey even when it thought it was hidden. But something about his voice confused her. It was gentle, almost soothing, completely unlike what she had expected from a predator species. When he said he wouldn't hurt her, there was something in his tone that made her want to believe him, even though everything she had been taught warned her against trusting any larger species, especially humans. She remained frozen in position, listening to his breathing below her. It was slow and steady, not the aggressive panting she associated with aroused predators. When he mentioned helping with her repair work, she realized he had been coordinating his actions with hers. The power isolation, the diagnostic sequences, he had been making her job easier and safer without her even realizing it. Zira's analytical mind began to war with her instinctive fear. The evidence suggested that this human was genuinely trying to help, but her cultural conditioning insisted that this must be some kind of trap. Humans were supposed to be unpredictable and dangerous. They weren't supposed to be cooperative and gentle. When Marcus stepped back from her position, giving her space, Zira felt something shift inside her chest. In her entire life, no larger species had ever voluntarily moved away to make her more comfortable. Usually, they either ignored her completely or crowded closer if they wanted something from her. She crawled forward slightly and peered down through the grating. The human, Marcus, was standing about 10 feet away, his hands visible and empty. He had removed his tool belt and set it on the ground, probably to show that he wasn't carrying any weapons. His posture was relaxed, non-threatening, and he was looking up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I can see you a little bit," Marcus said softly. "You're smaller than I expected. Are you injured? I heard what sounded like pain a few minutes ago." Zira touched her left ankle, which she had twisted when she jerked in surprise at his first words. It wasn't serious, but it was tender. She debated whether to respond, then realized that staying silent would probably worry him more. "I am not badly hurt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Speaking standard galactic with a human felt surreal, like something from a dream. "That's good," Marcus replied, and she could hear relief in his voice. "Can you tell me what's wrong? Maybe I can help from down here." Zira hesitated, then decided to focus on the work. Work was safe, familiar, something she understood. "The primary air scrubber has a damaged biofilter. It needs to be replaced, but the access panel is stuck. I cannot get enough leverage in this position." "Ah," Marcus said thoughtfully. "That makes sense. The readings down here show reduced filtration efficiency in that system. Hold on a moment." Zira watched as Marcus consulted a device that looked like a data pad. She could see him scrolling through information, probably system schematics. When he found what he was looking for, he looked back up at her. "There should be an emergency release for that panel," he said. "It would be a small lever, probably colored yellow or red, located about 6 inches to the right of the main access handle." "Can you see anything like that?" Zira crawled forward to the processor housing and examined it more carefully. Sure enough, there was a small red lever that she had missed in her initial inspection. When she pulled it, she heard a soft click and the access panel opened easily. "How did you know about that?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I've been studying the technical manuals for this class of station," Marcus replied. "Emergency releases are required by galactic safety standards, but they're not always obvious. I figured someone your size might not be able to see it from a normal working angle." His explanation made sense, but what struck Zira most was that he had thought about her limitations and provided a solution without making her feel inadequate. Most larger species would have either ignored her problem or made comments about Catherian weakness. With the panel open, Zira could see the damaged biofilter clearly. It was definitely beyond repair. The organic matrix had degraded to the point where replacement was the only option. She reached into her tool pack and pulled out a new filter unit. "The damaged filter is pretty bad," she reported as she worked. "It will take me a few minutes to install the replacement properly." "Take your time," Marcus said. "I'll monitor the power systems from down here to make sure everything stays stable while you work." As Zira began the careful process of removing the damaged filter, she found herself relaxing slightly. Marcus kept up a gentle stream of status updates about the power systems, letting her know when he was making adjustments that might affect her work. His voice remained calm and encouraging, and he never once suggested that he could do the job better or faster. "You know," Marcus said during a quiet moment, "I've been really impressed by the maintenance work on this station. Everything I've looked at has been properly serviced and well maintained. The Catherians must be excellent engineers." The compliment was so unexpected that Zira nearly dropped the filter she was installing. In her experience, other species generally treated Catherian work as adequate at best, usually with complaints about speed or thoroughness. No one had ever called them excellent. "We do our best," she replied carefully. "It shows," Marcus said. "I've worked on a lot of different space installations, and this station is in better condition than most. That doesn't happen by accident. Zira finished installing the new biofilter and began the delicate process of calibrating its integration with the existing air processing systems. This was the most technically demanding part of the job, requiring precise adjustments to maintain proper atmospheric balance for all the different species aboard the station. How many different atmospheric requirements do you have to account for? Marcus asked, apparently noticing her careful adjustments. 47 different species configurations, Zira replied, focused on her calibration readings, plus 15 different mixed atmosphere zones for areas where multiple species work together. That's incredible, Marcus said, and she could hear genuine admiration in his voice. The complexity of maintaining life support for that many different biological systems simultaneously. I'm beginning to understand why this station runs so smoothly. Zira felt a strange warmth spread through her chest at his words. Pride, she realized. For the first time in her life, someone from a larger species was acknowledging the skill and complexity involved in her work, rather than just taking it for granted. The calibration completed successfully, and all the system readings returned to normal parameters. Zira ran a final diagnostic to ensure everything was functioning properly. Repair complete, she announced. All atmospheric systems are operating within normal parameters. Excellent work, Marcus said. The readings down here confirm everything looks good. You've probably just improved life support quality for hundreds of beings. Zira began packing her tools but found herself reluctant to leave. For the first time in her life, she had worked alongside someone who treated her as an equal professional, rather than just a small, convenient maintenance tool. The experience had been so different from her expectations that she felt confused and uncertain about what to do next. Marcus, she said hesitantly. Yes? Thank you for helping with the power systems. It made the repair much safer and easier. Thank you for fixing the filtration system, he replied. I couldn't have reached it from down here. We made a good team, a team. Zira had never been part of a team with a larger species before. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Over the following days, Zira found herself thinking about her encounter with Marcus more than she cared to admit. She had reported the successful repair to her supervisor, mentioning only that she had received some assistance with the power systems from station personnel. She hadn't specified that the assistance came from a human, knowing it would only cause alarm among her fellow Cytherians. But she couldn't stop replaying the conversation in her mind. The way Marcus had spoken to her, with respect and genuine interest in her work, was unlike anything she had experienced before. Most larger species barely acknowledge Cytherian existence, treating them as living tools rather than individuals with thoughts and feelings. 3 days after the air filtration repair, Zira was assigned to maintenance work in Section G, a busy commercial area where multiple species operated shops and trading posts. The work involved recalibrating the atmospheric processors to accommodate a new Zelrani merchant who required a slightly different gas mixture than the standard humanoid blend. She was working in a maintenance alcove behind the main commercial corridor when she heard familiar voices approaching. Her supervisor, Keth, was talking to someone in the careful, deferential tone Cytherians used when speaking to larger species. Yes, honored sir, we can certainly accommodate your atmospheric requirements, Keth was saying. Our technician is working on the adjustments now. It should be completed within the hour. Excellent, came the reply, and Zira's hearts jumped as she recognized Marcus's voice. I appreciate your efficiency. The merchant I'm escorting has been concerned about the atmospheric compatibility. Zira peered around the corner and saw her supervisor walking with Marcus and a tall, thin Zelrani she didn't recognize. The Zelrani's gills were fluttering slightly, indicating mild respiratory distress from the current atmospheric mixture. If I may ask, Marcus continued, is the technician working on this the same one who handled the Section C environmental repair a few days ago? The work there was exceptionally well done. Keth looked surprised. Yes, honored sir. That would be Zira. She is one of our most skilled atmospheric specialists. I thought so, Marcus said with what sounded like satisfaction. Her work was very professional. I was impressed by her technical knowledge. Zira felt that same strange warmth in her chest that she had experienced during their first encounter. Marcus was praising her work to her supervisor, something that had never happened before. Most larger species, if they mentioned Cytherian work at all, focused on complaints or requests for faster service. Yes, sir. Keth stammered, clearly unsure how to respond to a larger species praising a Catherian's work. Zira is very dedicated, very thorough. Would it be possible for me to observe the work? Marcus asked. I'm still learning about atmospheric processing for multiple species, and I understand this involves some particularly complex adjustments. Keth looked even more confused. In Zira's experience, larger species never wanted to observe Catherian work unless they were checking for errors or pushing for faster completion. I suppose that would be acceptable, Keth said slowly. Though I should warn you, the workspace is quite cramped. Not designed for someone of your size. That's fine, Marcus replied. I don't need to get close. I'd just like to understand the process better. Zira quickly ducked back into the maintenance alcove, her mind racing. Marcus wanted to observe her work. Not to criticize or hurry her, but to learn from her. The idea was so foreign that she had trouble processing it. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps approaching the alcove. She looked up to see Keth peering in, looking nervous and uncertain. Zira, he said quietly, there is a human engineer who wishes to observe your atmospheric calibration work. He specifically requested you after seeing your previous work in Section C. I know, Zira said, then quickly added, I heard you talking in the corridor. It's acceptable to me if you think it's appropriate. Keth looked relieved that she wasn't objecting. Very well. Please proceed with your work as normal. And Zira, try not to make any mistakes. It's unusual for a larger species to take interest in our work. As her supervisor left, Zira heard Marcus approach the alcove entrance. She was hunched over an atmospheric control panel, making fine adjustments to the gas mixture ratios. Hello, Zira, Marcus said softly. Thank you for letting me observe. I hope I'm not making you nervous. Hello, Marcus, she replied, surprised by how natural it felt to use his name. You are not making me nervous. I am concentrating on the calibration. Of course, he said. Don't let me interrupt your focus. I'm just interested in learning about the process. Zira continued her work, but found herself explaining what she was doing as she made each adjustment. Zelrani respiratory systems require a 17% increase in nitrogen concentration and a 3% decrease in oxygen content compared to standard humanoid atmosphere. But the adjustment must be gradual to avoid shocking the systems of other species who might be in the area during the transition. That makes sense, Marcus said thoughtfully. How do you calculate the transition rate to avoid problems for other species? The question showed a level of technical understanding that impressed Zira. Most larger species, when they asked about Catherian work at all, wanted simple explanations that glossed over the complex details. It depends on the respiratory sensitivity of each species present, she explained, pulling up a data chart on her console. Humans, for example, can tolerate quite rapid atmospheric changes because your respiratory systems are very adaptable. Volcari require much more gradual transitions because their metabolism is more sensitive to oxygen fluctuations. Fascinating, Marcus said. So you're essentially choreographing the atmospheric change to accommodate the biology of every species in the area, simultaneously. Choreographing, Zira repeated, testing the word. I have not heard it described that way before, but it is accurate. Each adjustment must be timed and sequenced to work with all the others. It's like conducting an orchestra, Marcus continued, where each instrument has completely different requirements, but they all have to work together to create harmony. Zira paused in her work, struck by the analogy. That is a beautiful way to think about it. Most people see atmospheric maintenance as just making sure everyone can breathe. They do not realize the artistry involved in balancing so many different needs. Most people probably don't understand the complexity involved, Marcus said. I certainly didn't until I started working on multi-species installations. The technical skill required to do what you do is remarkable. The warmth in Zira's chest intensified. Remarkable. He had called her work remarkable. She had to focus carefully to keep her hands steady as she completed the calibration sequence. The transition is complete, she announced, checking her readings one final time. Atmospheric composition is now optimal for Zelrani physiology, while maintaining acceptable parameters for all other species in the area. Excellent work, Marcus said. How long did you have to study to learn atmospheric engineering at this level? The question surprised Zira. No one had ever asked about her education before. I have been studying atmospheric systems since I was very young. My family, we have worked in life support maintenance for many generations, but I also studied xenobiology and multi-species physiology through the Galactic Education Network. Self-taught xenobiology? Marcus asked, sounding impressed. That's not easy material to learn without formal instruction. It was necessary for my work, Zira said, though privately she admitted she had studied far beyond what was strictly required for her job. She found the diversity of biological systems fascinating. Would you, Marcus began, then seemed to hesitate. Would you be interested in having lunch sometime? I mean, if Catherians eat the same kinds of food as humans, I'd love to hear more about your work, and maybe I could tell you about some of the atmospheric challenges I've encountered on other stations. Zira's entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. A human was asking her to share a meal, to have a conversation as equals. It was so far outside her experience that she wasn't sure how to respond. Yes, she said finally. Catherians can eat most foods that are safe for humans, and I would like to hear about your experiences as well. Great, Marcus said, and she could hear genuine pleasure in his voice. The station has a multi-species dining area that should accommodate both our needs. How about tomorrow during the second shift meal period? That would be acceptable, Zira managed to say, though her hearts were racing with excitement and terror in equal measure. The next day, Zira found herself changing her work coveralls 3 times before settling on her least stained set. She had never cared about her appearance when interacting with other species before, but something about meeting Marcus felt different, important. The multi-species dining area was located in the central hub of Nexus 7, designed to accommodate the various social and dietary needs of dozens of different species. Zira had eaten there occasionally, usually sitting alone in one of the smaller alcoves designed for species who preferred privacy or solitude. When she arrived, Marcus was already waiting at a table that had been adjusted to accommodate both their heights. He had somehow found a chair that would allow Zira to sit comfortably, while still being able to reach the table surface. The thoughtfulness of the gesture made her chest tight with emotion. Zira, Marcus said, standing as she approached. The formal gesture surprised her. In her experience, larger species rarely showed such courtesy to Catherians. Thank you for meeting me. I hope this table height works for you. It is perfect, she replied, settling into the adjusted chair. Thank you for arranging it. I asked the dining staff about seating that would work for both of us, Marcus explained as he sat down. They were very helpful once I explained what I needed. As they looked over the menu options, Zira found herself stealing glances at Marcus. Up close, he looked less intimidating than she had expected. His features were regular and pleasant, with kind eyes that seemed to focus on her with genuine interest, rather than the vague dismissal she was used to from larger species. The station grows its own vegetables in hydroponic gardens, Marcus said, pointing to several items on the menu. I toured the facility yesterday and the variety is impressive. They even have crops from species I've never heard of. I have worked on those systems, Zira said. The atmospheric control for the growing chambers is very complex. Different plants require different gas mixtures and humidity levels. I bet that's challenging, Marcus replied. Do you enjoy that kind of work more than the standard life support maintenance? The question caught Zira off guard. No one had ever asked if she enjoyed her work before. It was assumed that Catherians simply did whatever tasks were assigned to them. Yes, she said slowly. I find the agricultural systems more interesting. There are so many variables to balance, and the work changes with each growing cycle. It is like solving a new puzzle each time. That sounds fascinating, Marcus said. I've always been interested in closed-loop life support systems. The idea of creating completely self-sustaining environments is amazing to me. As they ordered their food and began eating, Zira found herself relaxing in a way she never had before in the presence of a larger species. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about her work, listened carefully to her answers, and shared his own experiences in a way that felt like genuine conversation rather than interrogation or condescension. On my last assignment, Marcus was saying, we had to design life support for a research station that would house 12 different species for 6 months. The atmospheric requirements were so different that we ended up creating separate environmental zones connected by airlocks. That must have been very expensive, Zira observed. Maintaining multiple atmosphere types requires much more energy and equipment. It was, Marcus agreed. But we couldn't find any other solution that would keep everyone healthy and comfortable. I wish I had known about some of the techniques you've described. Your approach to gradual atmospheric transitions might have allowed us to use mixed zones instead of complete separation. Each situation is different, Zira said, but if you encounter similar challenges in the future, I would be happy to discuss possible solutions. Marcus smiled. I'd like that very much. Actually, I've been wondering if you'd be interested in collaborating on some projects. The human delegation is here to establish ongoing technical exchanges with other species, and atmospheric engineering is one of our priority areas. Zira nearly choked on her food. You want to collaborate with me? Officially. Why not? Marcus asked. You're clearly an expert in your field, and humans have a lot to learn about multi-species environmental management. It would be a mutually beneficial partnership. But I am just a maintenance technician, Zira protested. I do not have advanced degrees or research credentials. Experience is worth more than credentials, Marcus said firmly. I've seen your work, and I've talked with you about complex technical problems. You have knowledge and skills that would be valuable to human engineers regardless of what titles you do or don't have. Zira felt tears gathering in her eyes. The idea that someone would value her knowledge and want to work with her as an equal partner was overwhelming. I would very much like to collaborate, she managed to say. Excellent, Marcus said, his smile widening. I'll talk to my supervisor about setting up a formal technical exchange. We could start with some research into improved atmospheric transition protocols. As they continued their meal, their conversation shifted to more personal topics. Marcus told her about growing up on Earth, about the vast blue oceans and the way sunlight looked when filtered through an atmosphere that was perfectly suited to human biology. Zira found herself describing Kithara, her homeworld, with its complex underground cities and the careful environmental management required to support life in the planet's harsh surface conditions. Your people are natural environmental engineers, Marcus observed. Growing up in a world where atmospheric management was literally a matter of survival would give you instincts that most species never develop. I never thought about it that way, Zira said. To us, it is simply normal to think carefully about air quality and temperature control and humidity levels. That's exactly what makes your knowledge so valuable, Marcus said. What seems obvious to you is advanced engineering to most other species. As their meal drew to a close, Zira realized that something fundamental had changed in her understanding of the galaxy and her place in it. For her entire life, she had accepted that Catherians were minor players in galactic civilization, useful for their technical skills but not significant enough to be true partners or colleagues. But Marcus saw her differently. He saw her as an expert, as someone with valuable knowledge and skills. More importantly, he treated her as an equal, someone whose thoughts and opinions mattered. Marcus, she said as they prepared to leave, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you being so kind to me? I know what most species think of Catherians. We are small and nervous and generally ignored. Why do you treat me differently? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. Where I come from, he said finally, we learned that the size of someone's body has nothing to do with the size of their mind or the value of their contributions. Some of the most important discoveries in human history were made by people who were overlooked or dismissed by others. He paused, then continued. But more than that, you've been nothing but professional, knowledgeable, and kind in every interaction we've had. You helped solve a complex technical problem. You answered my questions patiently, and you've shared your expertise generously. Why wouldn't I treat you with respect and kindness? Zira felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for her entire life. Hope. The possibility that she might be more than just a small, useful creature that larger species tolerated. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me as more than just what I am. You are exactly what you should be, Marcus said gently, and what you are is remarkable. 6 months later, Zira stood in a conference room she never could have imagined entering before meeting Marcus. Around the curved table sat representatives from a dozen different species, including 3 other humans from Marcus's technical delegation. She wore a new uniform bearing the insignia of the Galactic Environmental Consortium, an organization that had recognized her expertise and offered her a position as a research specialist. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. After their first lunch together, Marcus had followed through on his promise to arrange official collaboration. What had started as informal technical discussions had evolved into joint research papers, conference presentations, and ultimately a complete shift in how the galactic community viewed Catherian contributions to environmental engineering. The atmospheric transition protocols developed by specialist Zira have been successfully implemented on 15 different installations, the consortium director was saying. Energy efficiency has improved by an average of 37%. While maintaining optimal life support for all species involved, Zira still felt a flutter of disbelief every time someone referred to her as Specialist Zira. The title represented not just recognition of her technical skills, but acceptance as a professional colleague rather than a convenient maintenance worker. Marcus caught her eye from across the table and smiled encouragingly. He had been instrumental in helping her navigate the complex process of gaining formal recognition for her expertise. More importantly, he had remained her strongest advocate and closest friend throughout the journey. "Are there any questions about the implementation timeline?" the director asked. A Volcari representative raised one of her forearms. "What training requirements would be needed for our technical staff to implement these protocols?" "Specialist Zira will be conducting training sessions on 7 different stations over the next 4 months, the director replied. "She's also developing standardized training materials that can be distributed throughout the galactic network." Zira's heart still raced when she thought about the training sessions. The idea of teaching other species, including many who were physically larger and traditionally more dominant, had been terrifying at first. But Marcus had helped her prepare, and her first few sessions had gone surprisingly well. It turned out that her technical expertise spoke louder than her small stature. After the meeting, Zira and Marcus walked together toward the observation deck of Nexus 7. It had become their traditional place for conversation, offering a view of the stars and the constant flow of ships representing dozens of different civilizations. "How are you feeling about the Androx station assignment?" Marcus asked as they settled into chairs designed for human-sized beings but adjusted with cushions to accommodate Zira's smaller frame. "Nervous," Zira admitted. "Androx is one of the largest trading stations in the sector. The environmental systems there are incredibly complex, and they've never had a Catherian in a senior technical position before. They requested you specifically because of your reputation," Marcus reminded her. "The consortium wouldn't have recommended you if they didn't think you could handle it." "I know," Zira said. "Logically, I understand that my qualifications are solid. But emotionally, sometimes I still feel like that frightened technician hiding in a maintenance shaft." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I've been thinking about that day we first met. You were doing essential work that kept hundreds of beings safe and comfortable, work that required incredible skill and knowledge. The only difference between then and now is that other people finally recognize what was always true, that you're an exceptional engineer. The difference is that you saw it first," Zira said softly. "Before you, no one had ever looked at me and seen anything more than a useful tool." "That says more about their blindness than about your worth," Marcus replied. "Your abilities were always there. Your knowledge was always valuable. You just needed someone to give you the opportunity to show it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a massive Zelrani freight hauler dock at one of the station's main bays. The sight reminded Zira of how much her world had expanded since that first day in the maintenance shaft. "Marcus," she said eventually, "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "I've been offered a permanent position with the consortium. They want me to head up a new department focused on small species environmental engineering. It would mean traveling to different installations throughout the galaxy, developing new protocols, training other specialists." "That's incredible news," Marcus said, though she detected a note of something else in his voice. "You'd be perfect for that kind of role." "The position would be based on Earth," Zira continued, watching his face carefully. "The consortium is establishing their new research facility there, and they want me to help design it." Marcus's expression shifted, surprise and excitement replacing the slight sadness she had noticed. "Earth? You'd be willing to live on a human world?" "I've been thinking about it for weeks," Zira said. "A year ago, the idea would have terrified me. But now, I think it might be exactly what I want. Your people have shown me that size and strength don't determine worth or capability. I want to be part of building that kind of society." "What about your family? Your community here?" Zira smiled. That's the other part of the offer. The consortium wants to establish exchange programs with Catherian technical colleges. Young Catherians would have opportunities to study and work alongside other species, to develop their skills beyond the traditional maintenance roles. You'd be changing the future for your entire people, Marcus said, understanding dawning in his expression. We'd be changing it, Zira corrected. The consortium also offered you a position on the research team. Something about needing someone with experience in human-alien technical collaboration? Marcus laughed. They offered me a job because of our work together? Our friendship has been noticed, Zira said. Apparently, successful cross-species collaboration is rarer than either of us realized. They want to study our methods and apply them to other partnerships. So we'd be colleagues again? We'd be partners, Zira said. Equal partners, working together to solve complex problems and help other species learn to work together the way we have. Marcus reached out and gently touched her small hand with one finger, a gesture they had developed as their version of a handshake. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. As they sat together looking out at the stars, Zira reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been a frightened maintenance worker who believed herself to be insignificant in the vast galactic community. Today, she was a recognized expert whose work was improving life for countless beings across multiple star systems. But more than professional success, she had discovered something she hadn't even known she was missing, the knowledge that she mattered, that her thoughts and skills and contributions had value, that she could be seen and respected and valued by others, regardless of her size or species. It had started with one human simple act of kindness, choosing to speak gently to a frightened alien instead of ignoring her or treating her as an obstacle. That single moment of recognition had changed not just her life, but her understanding of what was possible. Marcus, she said as they prepared to leave the observation deck, do you think we can really change how different species see each other? I think we already have, he replied. One friendship at a time, one collaboration at a time. Change doesn't happen all at once. It happens when individuals choose to see past their preconceptions and recognize the value in others. Even when those others are very small and easily frightened? Especially then, Marcus said with a smile. Because courage isn't about being big and strong. It's about continuing to work and learn and grow even when you're afraid. And you, Zira, are one of the bravest beings I've ever met. As they walked back through the station corridors, Zira noticed other Catherians moving with less of the nervous hunching that had once characterized their interactions with larger species. Word of her success had spread through their community, and while change was slow, it was beginning. Young Catherians were asking about technical education opportunities. Others were speaking up more in mixed species work situations. One action had changed her world. Marcus's choice to speak kindly to a frightened alien had created ripples that were still spreading, touching lives and opening possibilities that neither of them had imagined. As they reached the transit hub where they would part ways for the evening, Zira looked up at Marcus and realized that sometimes the most powerful force in the galaxy wasn't technology or weapons or political influence. Sometimes it was simply the decision to treat another being with dignity and respect, regardless of their size or species or status. That simple choice could change everything.